Hi, everyone. Thanks for showing up on I guess today is Wednesday, lunchtime, East Coast, morning time, West Coast. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. I'd love it if anybody wants to. We run these as Zoom meetings, not Zoom webinars. So if people are willing to put themselves on video just for a little bit, it's nice to see people's faces just to get to know people. And I apologize if there's some, thank you, from some background noise. They started cleaning my lawn not that long ago, I guess, picking up the leaves. So I hope that that doesn't come through too loudly, but let me know if it does. But hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so today we are, sorry, let me make sure people are joining from the, okay, great. Today we're talking about merit scholarships. I looked at the list of people who registered, and we have mainly families with who are going to graduate in class of 2026, maybe some 2027s, but there are actually a fair number of people with high school seniors. So if before we really get started, just put in the chat what year your student is graduating high school. And if you're a class of 2025, if there's anything particular that you want to know about, just because the clock is really ticking for making sure that you guys, students get their application in, let me know. If you want to put your question or topic in chat, that would be great. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the questions, that's fine too. So just want to make sure that if someone from class of 2025 has a pressing question, that I can go over it. And I'm going to share slides, talk to you about, merit scholarships, how they work, how to find colleges that can offer them, talk to you about data that you can look at, and show you a tool that we have that makes that process easier. But, a lot of what I am going to share today is just going to be good general knowledge, whether you use our tool or whether you go out and kind of do this research on your own. I think what I have to share today will be helpful. So just again, before I start, curious, who's already started researching colleges and merit scholarships, particularly if you're a class of 2026. This is like a great time to start to learn all of this. Okay, let's see. Somebody said a little yes. Okay, good. Okay, well, I am really happy to see, again, those class of 2026s, 2027s here, because you have enough of a lead time to make yourself familiar, to do the research. It's just honestly, painstaking when we get comments or requests from parents or families. Like late in the process, we try and help as much as possible, but time is your advantage in this process. So time for parents to learn and get ahead of the curve really helps you. Just the later you start, the more tension there is, the more possibilities of making mistakes, just getting burnt out because you're trying to cram too much in a short period of time. This session is recorded, and we always send a link out the next day. So if you have to drop off, you want to watch it again, you want to share it with your student, you'll have access to it. Okay, I'm going to share my slides, get started. Feel free to ask questions along the way. I will look at the chat, and we'll try and get as much in as we can. Okay, let's okay, let me share. Great. If somebody could just put a thumbs up, just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the people on video. Just nice to see humans in our remote world these days. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to talk about merit scholarships. I'm also going to talk a little bit about SAI for those of you who may or may not be familiar with it. It's a student aid index and how that plays into you as a parent knowing what type of aid you should be looking for, and therefore what type of colleges you should be looking for. And we'll talk about how you start to build a balanced college list and how to use our tool and the data that's involved in it, if that's something you want to take a look at. So the reason why we focus so much on merit scholarships is, it all goes back to how are we all going to pay for college. I mean, we all know, we've seen the news, the price of college has over the past 10, 15 years increased significantly more than inflation. That's a whole conversation onto itself. Why has that happened? But as a parent, you're just kind of faced with the reality of what tuition and cost of attendance is these days. And there's really three big buckets that families can use to pay for college. One is from what I would call family contribution. If you've been able to save money, whether it's in a 529 or you've put other money aside, obviously you're going to apply that to paying for college. A lot of parents also can cash flow as much as they can from their current income. Another item that I didn't put on there is if you're lucky enough to have other family members, grandparents who are willing to contribute. So that's all money that you've either been able to save or other family members are willing to contribute. So you have that bucket of money. Then you have what I call free money. And free money, obviously by its term, is money you're going to get somehow, and we'll talk about it. And luckily, you do not have to pay it back. And free money can come in the form of financial aid, which is going to be based on your financial situation. Another term for that is need-based aid. Or it's going to come from merit scholarships. And those two line items, which I've highlighted, come directly from the college. It's also another phrase is called institutional aid. So institutional meaning it's coming from the college, and the college has policies or philosophy about how they're going to give out their money to attract students. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And colleges use their money to attract students either by helping students that have financial need, or they attract students by giving them money because they've accomplished a lot, usually through their academics and sometimes other talents. So those are the two main sources of free money that colleges provide. Of course, then there's private scholarships, which is kind of a whole discussion onto itself. But that just takes, the students can definitely find free money that way. It takes a little bit more effort. It's not usually going to be in the large dollar amounts that colleges are going to be giving through their need-based aid or merit scholarships. And then the last form is from the government, but that money is usually for families with low income. A lot of that money is coming from Pell Grants, and that's going to be determined when you fill out the FAFSA, although you can get an estimate of whether or not you'll be eligible for those types of grants. So those are the main buckets of where free money comes from. And then the last is if you add up what money you might have saved and your family can contribute. If you have estimated, and we're going to show you how you can estimate what money you're going to get from these free sources, what's left over, this gap, you and or your student are going to have to decide whether or not you're going to borrow money. And the two main sources of where students borrow money is from the federal government, and then but there are caps on how much students can borrow from the federal government. And after those caps are met, then families need to either look at the Parent Plus loan, which is also from the federal government, or private loans. So I don't go into a lot of detail now about loans, but I want to put it out there because, I think as part of the search process, as part of the discussion of families figuring out what your budget is, you should also figure out, what your tolerance is for borrowing. And I make no judgment. Some families, rightly so, say we don't want our student to borrow anything. That is great if that can happen. So then you just need to know how much, can you contribute and how much free money can you get? And that's your budget. And if you don't want to borrow anything, you really have to stick to finding those colleges that are going to fit within that budget range. So, and then the other reason why I mentioned loans at this point is, and I kind of refer to it quickly, is that there are caps on how much your student can borrow. And that comes as a surprise to a lot of parents. They just say, oh, well, if there's a gap, my student will borrow it. So, that's going to be on them. But that's not the reality. Your student in their freshman year can only borrow on their own without a cosigner, can only borrow $5,500. So you can factor that in, if you're okay with your student borrowing that. But if there's a gap larger than $5,500, you as a parent are going to need to get involved. Either you're going to have to take out the loan in your name, or you're going to have to become a cosigner on a private loan. So again, we go.
Vou gravar.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I lost my internet connection for a second, so I'm glad that you guys are back. Let me reshare. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. Okay, so what's so important about this? The college list is the most pivotal part of this process. So the college list is going to drive your family's final cost of college, right? It's going to drive where your students get accepted. So the colleges on that list are also going to drive how much work it's going to take for your student to actually apply, because it's going to dictate the number of essays that they need to fill out. Even though there is, quote, the Common App, there is so much more that is uncommon that students need to do besides just the main personal essay. So, and the college list is the colleges your student is going to apply to. Where they apply to, right, is ultimately where they're going to get accepted, waitlisted, denied. And where they get accepted is ultimately going to determine your final cost of college, because those are the colleges that your student has the option of going to. And so you can see from starting from this whole universe of colleges, you create a college list, and it's ultimately going to narrow down to a few choices that you and your student have. And those choices are going to be where they get accepted. And then ultimately, those choices of where they get accepted is going to be how much it's going to cost you. Don't wait to the very end to kind of estimate these numbers. You can get a general sense of what those costs are going to be of the colleges that are on your students list. You can't get an exact number, but it's important that you have an estimate. And I think most people can honestly estimate, maybe between $5,000 and $8,000 of where that cost is going to be. Again, it's not ideal, but I think it's so important because we've seen so many families that kind of at that stage of the process where their student gets accepted. Actually, I had a parent write me just the other day. My student got accepted to an Ivy League school, early decision, and they're first kind of now wondering whether they can afford to send their student. That's way too late in the process. They should have figured that out, and they could have figured that out, and they should have had that discussion before that student decided to apply early decision. So, and that's kind of the education that we're going to try and give you today. Okay. For those of you who are really new to the process, merit aid is really, to be blunt, a form of a tuition discount. Going back to the phrase that I said, colleges give out, or merit scholarships are a form of institutional aid. Think of it, I mean, we all know that colleges are businesses. This is their money, that it's their institutional funds, and they're making the decisions about how they're going to distribute this money. And if they're giving it for merit scholarships, they're usually making decisions that we want to use this money to attract a certain type of a student. We want to maybe attract a stronger student that might ordinarily come here if we didn't give them a scholarship or, quote, a discount. That's why a lot of merit aid money is tied to students' GPA and test scores. And it's usually tied to trying to attract a stronger student, a student that is at the higher range of that college's, test profile or testing profile or their GPA profile, because ultimately all colleges are trying to raise their academic level and where they fall in terms of the rankings. Even though rankings, I really feel, have become less popular, it's still actually, believe it or not, rankings are tied to, or I should say the other way, a college's bond rating, a part of the college's bond rating is related to their ranking. So you can see there's a lot of connections between a college's ranking and the types of students they can attract. So that's why they're using their money kind of strategically to say, hey, we want to try and convince a student that might not look at us that we are worthwhile and can give them a good education, and we're going to sweeten the offer by giving them some money to think about coming to us. Oops, sorry. The other thing I wanted to point out about merit scholarships that people should understand is why it's so important to look at that, whether a school offers merit scholarship now, is that a lot of those offerings happen as part of the admissions process. So a lot of merit scholarship money is given to incoming freshmen. There are merit scholarships that are given to transfer students, but the bulk of it really is reserved to attract that student on the initial application. And that's why it's so important to consider it as part of the college search process now. The other thing, and this we'll talk about later on in the process, is that merit scholarships usually come with some sort of minimum GPA requirement. It's not something you need to necessarily research at this point, but before your student accepts a scholarship, you want to know what the requirements are for renewal, because most merit scholarships are offered and renewed for 4 years. Again, that's why it's important to get it as that incoming freshman. So the worst situation is that if a student and a family has decided a student is going to go to a college and the college is affordable because the student is getting a merit scholarship, and then somewhere during the 4 years the student loses the merit scholarships, well, then all of a sudden this, quote, affordable college has become unaffordable because they don't have that scholarship money. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Part of avoiding that is understanding what the minimum requirement is, which is usually a GPA requirement, to make sure that that scholarship is renewable. Okay, before I start this, let me see what other quick questions there are. So somebody is asking, since the majority are probably aware of merit. Oh, okay. So somebody is asking, will I be talking about money related to sports recruitment? Honestly, no. This merit scholarship money is not connected to scholarships, athletic scholarships. The only connection is for Division III colleges, which do not offer athletic scholarships. Instead, they do offer merit scholarships to athletes. So the best combination, if your student is an athlete and they're applying to a Division III school, you want them to have strong academics, because likely whatever money the coach can offer that student, it's going to come from a merit scholarship. The other benefit of actually athletes getting merit scholarships is that if for whatever reason they get hurt or something happens and they're no longer on that team for the full 4 years, they still have their scholarship. Obviously, if it's an athletic scholarship that's tied to their performance and something happens to them, they could lose that scholarship. So that's the only connection that I'm going to reference in terms of merit scholarships and athletic scholarships. All the other athletic recruiting is a whole different, ball game, which we don't talk about right now. Here's a question: are need blind statements from colleges, schools accurate? I've read they are not, and several schools recently settled a lawsuit about this. So I think the lawsuit is still going on, to tell you the truth. Oh, maybe what you're referencing is that some of the schools that were part of the lawsuit settled outside, but there's a group of schools that are still going through the lawsuit. I really do think that the colleges that say that they are need blind are need blind, and what need blind is that when a student's application comes through, there's the admissions committee, and they are making decisions without knowing any of the student's financial situation. So they're not looking at data that might come in through the FAFSA or the CSS profile. They are making their decisions without any implications to financial data. There's a very small number of schools that are, quote, in this need blind category, and they're really the wealthiest schools. So they are the Ivies, they are schools like MIT. I'm not going to kind of rattle them all off, but maybe there's 15 of them. That's it, that are really what they call need blind. The rest I would call absolutely need aware. And so that means that, yes, as your student's application comes through, the admissions officers, the admissions team can be and might be aware of whether you requested financial aid and how much aid your student might need. I'm not going to make a judgment call on whether that's proper or not, but again, going back to the reality of colleges are businesses, and they only have so much aid that they can give out. At some point, they've got to decide if there are two students that are similar academically, but one's going to need more aid than the other, and they don't have the budget for it. They might be making that decision, and weighing a little bit more on the financial side. So, and that is the majority of colleges, particularly in the economic environment that the colleges are working in these days. The other side I would kind of say about that is, colleges they want to enroll students that are going to be able to finish academically for 4 years, and to also finish financially, that they can pay, whether it's with the aid that they give or they have the resources to really pay for the 4 years of college. The worst debt that there is students who start college, take on some sort of student loan debt, and then aren't able to finish college. So I know it's a harsh reality, but colleges are kind of combining looking at your students' application, their academic profile, and to some extent, how much aid that you do or do not need. Okay, so somebody's asking, is there any wiggle room with colleges before or after early decision to negotiate? If you're a student applying early decision, there's not a ton of wiggle room. So what Meredith is referring to is that some colleges, after your student gets an offer, you can appeal. You can appeal based on financial situations because your finances may have changed since the finances that the FAFSA looks at, and also because maybe your student has gotten other offers. So they have options of other places that they can go, and they also might have improved academically from when they sent in their application. So, so we actually have whole sessions coming up in January and February that talk about how do you appeal whatever the offer is that your student received. In terms of early decision, there isn't a ton of wiggle room because, again, if your student has made that commitment to apply early decision, then the college is expecting, if your student has been accepted, they are going to go. There's nothing legal about this kind of agreement. It's a little bit moral, and to some extent, colleges do find out if you've broken an early decision agreement for reasons that aren't valid. So the biggest valid reason for why you might break an early decision agreement is because the financial offer that the colleges had sent, you truly cannot afford. And, you know, I don't really believe, I mean, there might be a tiny bit of wiggle room if you go back to the college on an early decision and say, hey, I thought my aid was going to come in at, I don't know, 20,000 and it came in at 25,000. Maybe they can adjust a little bit, but they're not going to make a big adjustment like, you know, the aid that they gave you was 20,000 and you really need 40,000. They'll just say, you know, sorry, this wasn't the right fit financially, but they are going to be annoyed at your school counselor and your high school to not better preparing that family for understanding the finances before committing to early decisions. So how they take out that annoyance, I don't, know. Sometimes, colleges, particularly the more selective colleges, might be much more careful about who they accept from those high schools in future years. But there might be some subtle, repercussions to other families if you do back out of an early decision. Again, if you truly cannot financially swing it, you should back out, but you should also do your best to estimate beforehand what the finances are going to be. Okay, let me skip back to the slides and keep going, and then I'll go back to questions. So in terms of merit scholarships, these are categories that we've just put together over the years. They're nothing official, but what we've noticed is that there's 3 major types of merit scholarships. One, which I call automatic, and I'll show you some examples. Basically, your student just has to send in their application, hopefully ahead of time. You might know whether their GPA and test scores are competitive, but they don't need to do anything differently. They just send in their application, and the college is looking at every application to possibly offer merit scholarships. The second is competitive, and that's where your student has to do something extra other than just sending in the normal application. There might be different deadlines. There definitely might be different essays. There might be an additional recommendation that is needed. So there's more work that your student's going to have to do to apply to that type of a merit scholarship. And the last is if your student has a special talent, and it could be, but this is a non-athletic talent. So it could be, music, art, theater, dance. And the reason why I highlight this is it's similar to the competitive merit scholarships where something more is going to need to be done. So usually there's a portfolio that might need to be uploaded. There's an addition that needs to be scheduled. And so what's really important about, particularly about the talent, but about all of these merit scholarships is that there are deadlines, particularly for the last 2 categories. For competitive and talent, there are deadlines that colleges set that you need to send in. And these deadlines could be very different than the regular decision or even early decision deadline. So again, the earlier you and your student are aware of this, and I mean like maybe over the summer before applying, the better, the less likely that you're going to miss these deadlines, and the more likely your student's going to be prepared and get everything in place in order to apply for the appropriate scholarships on time. Okay, so here's an example of a school that provides automatic merit scholarships. And the reason I picked this, and a lot of the schools that fall into this category of automatic merit scholarships tend to be more transparent, which we like. So by transparent, I mean that they put on their website some sort of a chart, some sort of a grid that says, if your student has these criteria, then they're going to be eligible for this range of merit scholarships. This is great, right? This is one way how you can start to estimate what your final cost is going to be. So this is just one example of Miami University in Ohio. And I happen to be tracking it, for the past almost 5 years about how they've been doing merit scholarships, and they've changed the grid. Sometimes the grid stays the same year to year. Other times, as you can see in the example, it does shift. So back in the bottom right corner, this was what the grid was like before the pandemic. So they absolutely required, test scores and GPA, and depending on where your student fell into one of these ranges, they would be eligible for potentially even a full tuition scholarship. And then Miami University is a state school, so they're giving out different scholarships for in-state students versus out-of-state students. So as you can follow along to the left and then the upper right and then the upper left, you can see that things changed a little bit. And particularly what changed was the GPA range that the colleges was looking for, and then the dollar amount that they were willing to offer for the GPA range. And that's why that happens, is because, again, I'm going to keep going back to that colleges are a business, and they actually work with a lot of consultants, and a big chunk of consultants that are involved in admissions are consultants called enrollment management consultants. And so they are looking every year, working with colleges and saying, hey, we said that a student needed to have a 3.95 as a GPA, and we were willing to give them, a full tuition scholarship. And that worked. So you know what? Maybe we don't have to give as much money away, and maybe we'll increase the GPA a little bit and see if we get the same number of students to apply and enroll, and we get the same or better quality student, and maybe we can spread the money we have out among more students. So it's just a constant optimization game. A school has a certain amount of money, and they are figuring out how can we spend that money to attract the most number of students with the highest quality. That's kind of the bottom line. We want to enroll as many students and at the best, quality or academic level that we can attract, and we want to use whatever money to attract as many of those types of students as possible. So you can see this is this grid, which is the current grid for the students who are applying and graduating in the class of 2025, is saying if you have a high school GPA of 4.3 and above, you will automatically be considered, whether you're in state or out of state. Let's look at the out of state, for at a minimum a $15,000 merit scholarship. They've taken away what the upper range is, but that at a minimum, if your student applies, they're going to have, and they have that GPA, they're going to get a $15,000 or more merit scholarship. So that's one way how you start to estimate what your final cost is going to be. And another way is absolutely to try and use every school that you're interested in, or your student is interested in, use their net price calculator. I can't guarantee the accuracy of it, because although the government requires colleges to have a net price calculator on their website, they do not require accuracy of it, but I would still do it. The more questions that the college asks, the more likely that the output of that calculator is going to be more accurate. Again, I wouldn't take that as a guarantee, whatever the result is, but I would start to, I guess, triangulate from different sources and estimate what your final cost is going to be. So one is to do the net price calculator. Another is to look at their charts, if they have a chart for automatic merit. A third is going to be to look at the data in the common data set, and we're going to show you that. And so, by looking at these different sources, you'll probably be able to get down to an estimate, again, that might be between $5,000 and $8,000 of what your final cost is going to be. The one other thing I like to point out about the example here I show on Miami University is that these charts are based on a weighted GPA. This is Miami University's choice about what GPA they're going to use when they look at students' applications and decisions for merit scholarships. Honestly, most colleges are looking at the unweighted GPA, and they recalculate the unweighted GPA, including only the core subjects. I point this out to just make sure that you and your student are looking at as closely as possible to the college website to see if they are identifying what GPAs that they are truly considering. If they don't make it clear, this is a great question. Your student can reach out to their maybe regional admissions officer and ask, I'm really interested in your college. I'm trying to understand what merit scholarships I might be eligible for. Just wanted to confirm, are you considering a weighted GPA or an unweighted GPA? So those details are just important to know, particularly if you're going to count on your student potentially getting some level of money at a school that automatically provides merit scholarships. And I just mentioned this quick story. Oh, a few years ago, we worked with a family, and the student, or they came to us after the fact, and the student and the parent had been looking at tables from a particular college, and they assumed their student would be at the top level, but they weren't paying attention to the GPA that was being used, and the student actually fell into the second level of what the merit scholarship award was. And so, I mean, all of this, they understood this before they made their final decision, but they were disappointed because they were expecting more dollars. So you can avoid that confusion if you're just more careful about looking at the details. Okay, let's just see if there's any questions. Yeah, somebody has highlighted from my previous slide that says, be aware merit scholarships don't increase as tuition increases. That's a really important point. Thank you for Marianne for pointing that out. And so what that means is that I really encourage families to consider what your 4-year cost of going to a college is. Not just can I cover the cost for 1 year, but how am I going to cover, me and my student, how are we going to cover the cost for 4 years? And so it is great that your student gets merit scholarships. That's definitely a big help for a lot of families. But as you're estimating out the 4 years, and you should probably estimate at a minimum a 5% increase every year, just unfortunately know that your student will get the merit scholarships for years 2 through 4, but they don't increase. It's a flat number. So thanks for pointing that out. What about scholarships if the student qualifies for an honors program? Those don't seem to be as easy to identify. For our older child, we would have applied to the honors program if she knew it meant money. That's a really good question. Again, some colleges are more transparent about if your student is in the honors program that they get extra money. Other colleges might have an honors program, but it's not clear on their website that if a student is accepted, they'll get extra money. These are great questions, and I kind of say they're kind of easy questions and approachable questions that your student should use to ask the college's admissions officer, and it kind of shows their interest. So you're right, Allison, some schools identify it on their website, others do not. And I will say that my experience is that the majority of honors programs do come with some additional merit money. I don't think that I would encourage almost every student, if they were asked to apply to an honors program, or if their qualifications kind of put them in that range to be accepted to an honors program, is to at least apply. There are other non-financial benefits to being in the honors program. So, you know, I can't answer your question with certainty. I would just say that ask a college, and definitely kind of encourage a student to kind of go that extra step and apply for the honors college, particularly if they've been asked to apply. Maggie is saying MIT just announced that if you make under $200,000 annually, then tuition is free. Yep, you still have to get in. Yep. So that's example of one of those very wealthy colleges with very generous policies. Many universities are announcing a deal if you make under $75,000 annually. I wouldn't. There's not like every college has that deal. If you make under $75,000, then the tuition is free. But there were a good number of colleges in the past 6 months that changed their income requirements and actually increased, meaning if you make more money, that they will still provide tuition free. You still have to pay for room and board, and you still have to get in. So I would, I can send a link to an article that shares what some of those colleges are. They tend to be very selective colleges. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So if you are accepted before the end of the year and your GPA goes up, is it possible to ask for more aid? Yes, Angela, I would definitely go back to a college if your student has improved, if they've gotten an honors, if they got some award. And that's part of what we discuss when we talk about appealing financial aid and appealing merit scholarships. definitely go back to a college and tell them all this. Actually, you might want to, and again, this is something we discussed in our session about appealing merit scholarships. You might want to hold off actually accepting your student where they're going to go to college if they know that some of this good news is coming through, because it gives them even more leverage with the college to say, hey, you wanted me, I might want you, and now I look even better than when you originally accepted me. Okay, let me go on. So competitive merit scholarship, as I mentioned, this is usually the student has to do something more than just send in their application. The reason why I highlight these two schools is because their deadlines for merit scholarships are different than their regular decision deadline. So the first college on the left is University of Southern California, and their deadline, if your student wants to be considered for merit scholarships, is November 1st. It's now the same deadline as their early admission deadline. So if your student doesn't make that deadline, they can still apply to University of Southern California, but they're not going to be considered for merit scholarships. So that's a case where understanding that deadline is going to make a big difference about whether your student is going to potentially be considered for more money or not. And the same thing on the example on the right, that's Boston University. Their deadline for merit scholarships is December 1st. And they also there's also this question about, in the world now of test optional, do you really need to have a test score to get merit? And there's no definitive answer to that. There are definitely colleges that are offering merit scholarships to students who don't have test scores. And then there's also colleges that we see where, majority of students that are offered merit do have a test score. And some schools actually are very open and say, we are test optional, but if you want to apply for merit scholarships, we are going to require your test scores. So again, this is like another level of detail that you need to look for. I'm not going to say that the colleges are all going to be transparent about this, but again, there's nothing wrong with asking this question to colleges that your student is interested in, and say, particularly if their student wants to apply test optional, your student can ask, are you still going to consider my application for merit scholarships if I don't send in a test score? So I would personally say if your student has a test score that's above the 50th percentile for that school and they want to apply for merit scholarships, then put it in, because the colleges they're going to use the test score if it really helps the student. And so if that test score helps the student get merit scholarship and it's there, great, because it's going to add one more, and it kind of validates the rest of the application. Then it's great. If your student has a really good application, but they didn't do well on a test, then don't send it in, because then it's going to look, obviously, it's not going to match up. Their test performance isn't going to match up to everything else on that application. And, it might kind of drag down the application. So these are kind of judgment calls you're going to have to make school by school. Okay, let me quickly move on to other things that are important related to merit scholarships. And I'm going to quickly go through this section, and then we'll get to how we use our tool to help you find merit scholarships. The reason why we talk about the numbers and cost of attendance, student aid index, your family need, and your family budget is because this all directs you to the type of college that you need to search for. So do you need a college that is very generous with need-based aid? And are going to probably be, need blind and offer a lot of aid to students, in certain income or financial need brackets? Or do you need to look for a college that is much more generous with merit aid? To be frank, most colleges usually fall into one category or the other. So the college that is very generous with need-based aid isn't usually going to give merit scholarships. In fact, all of those really wealthy need-blind colleges that do give very good need-based financial aid packages don't give any merit scholarships. And then it swings to the other end. The colleges that are giving a lot of money through merit don't tend to be as generous in need-based aid. There's a a few colleges, I call them in the sweet spot, that are very generous with need and very generous with merit, but it's a handful. So you need to know, where does your family sit? Like, am I a family that needs to find the college that is generous for need-based aid, or am I a family that needs to find the college that is generous with merit? And so in order to know where your family sits, you need to know information about your student aid index, the cost of attendance, and understand what family need is. That's why I go through this section. Okay, this is a great chart that actually one of our partners, partner companies that we work with, they're called Juno, put together. And this gives you an idea. This is based on SAI, which comes from the FAFSA. So this is for colleges that are not using the CSS profile to determine aid. They're just using the FAFSA form. This gives you a sense of whether or not you might receive aid depending on what your income, your household income is, and your assets. So on a really quick explanation, the FAFSA calculation, which generates the SII, the majority of that calculation is based on your household income. And sorry to kind of gloss over this, but this is actually a whole topic unto itself, which we actually have a video for. But I'm just kind of giving you the highlights of what goes into understanding these numbers. So that's why we have parent income on the left side of this chart and parent assets on the top right. Student income and student assets are also included, but students generally don't have a lot of income, and they generally don't have a lot of assets. So to get a quick estimate, we look at the parent income and the parent assets. So you can see in the red category, families that have above 250,000 in household income, depending on what your assets are, you might still receive aid, but it starts to really decline. And definitely, if you're over 350, your likelihood of getting need-based aid from a college is just not feasible. So these are just quick ways to understand kind of where you fall. So quite honestly, I would say if you're a family that earns 350,000 and above, you need to find a way to reduce the cost of college, you're really going to need to look for colleges that are offering merit scholarship, because it's very unlikely that any college is going to offer you need-based aid. So your student can apply to the colleges that might offer need-based aid, but don't expect that the college is going to offer you aid. Your student can still get in, but you're going to most likely have to pay the sticker price. So again, this is all about setting expectations and estimating what your costs are going to be before your student even applies. It doesn't mean they can still apply, but now at least you have an expectation of, okay, we're just going to see if Johnny got into that school, but we know if we're not going to get aid, that even though Johnny got in, we're not going to send him there because we can't afford it, but we just want to see what happens. That's okay, because you kind of know what you're going to do based on the results. And as long as you have other colleges on that list that you are going to be able to afford, you have options. It's the family that doesn't do this, doesn't gather this type of knowledge, doesn't do this estimates, and then just applies to a list of schools based on where the student wants to go. And of course they have, I hate the term dream college, and they're hoping that they get into the best possible college, and they don't pay attention to costs. And you'd think in this day and age, with everything that, all the media attention that there is to the cost of college, that families wouldn't do this, but they do. And then they're left in, March when all of their students' acceptances come back, and they just don't have a financially viable option because they didn't apply to the right schools from a financial perspective. So that's the purpose of this chart, is to just give you a quick sense of, am I going to be a family that is going to need need-based aid, or we really need to look for colleges that are offering merit? Okay, quickly going to go through this. So actually, I'm just going to jump here to this image that shows the other piece of information that's important is your college budget. Like, your family has to determine how much do you have, how much are you willing to pay for college. So the government's going to determine what your SAI is, because that's going to come through the FAFSA calculation. There are ways, and we did a session actually about a month ago. There are ways that you might be able to lower your SAI. But again, since the majority of SAI is based on income, unless you're going to take a cut in your income, and maybe unfortunately that might happen to some people, unplanned, it's kind of hard to really significantly reduce your SAI. Some families might be able to tweak things around the edges, but you're not going to see a huge change in what you can do with your SAI because so much of it is based on your income. So, so you can estimate what your SAI is ahead of time by going to, I would Google federal SAI estimator, and the federal government has a tool that can give you that you can put your numbers in, and they'll estimate what your SAI. So the college is going to use the SAI number to determine what your family's need is. They basically, very simple, look at their total cost of attendance, which is COA. That includes, tuition, room and board, any other required fees, or an estimate of fees for traveling and just living expenses. And then they're going to subtract what your SAI is, because that's what the government is saying. That's kind of the likelihood of what you can afford to pay for college. And then what's left over is your family's need. So let me clarify that what the government is estimating what you can afford to pay for college, which is your SAI, does not mean that that's going to be what it costs you to pay for college. Those are two different outcomes. And what your family need is going to vary by college, because what the cost of a college is, it varies. Some colleges these days, crazy enough, are in the $90,000 range. And some colleges, state colleges, might be in $20,000 range. So at some college, your SAI is going to be above the cost of cost of attendance. And at other colleges, your SAI is going to be a little below the cost of attendance. And then you factor in what your family's budget is, which has nothing to do with what the government thinks you can afford to pay, and has nothing to do with what a college, feels that you can afford to pay, or what the final cost is going to be at a college. You have to determine, with whatever savings you have, and whether or not your student wants to, you and your student wants to take on debt, how much you're willing to pay for college. So the example I give here is the family, based on the calculations, the government is saying, hey, you have an SAI of $90,000. So at most schools, if that student applies to colleges that don't have any merit scholarships, that family is going to be expected to pay the full price of attendance, because their SAI is going to be above most of the college's cost of attendance, right? But they've decided that doesn't matter what the government's saying. What matters is that they feel that they only have a budget of $45,000. And there's lots of reasons for that, and nobody's going to make a judgment call. So they have to be very cognizant of the schools that they apply to. They could potentially find schools that off the bat have a cost of attendance that are equal to or less than their budget, or they're going to have to find schools that offer merit scholarships that help bring down the cost of attendance closer to what their budget is. And that's where the work comes in. Okay, I'm going to skip to show you what our tool is called Insights, and just kind of tell you it's a way to more easily find these schools where your student is likely to get merit scholarships. So the way we do this is we've pulled the data together that's out there. Some of it is private data, and some of it is public data, but it's just the public data is a little harder to use because it's from the government, and it's not all pulled together in one place where you can do what I call a reverse lookup. So that's what our tool is about. We want to make the searching easier for you, because we want you to make better decisions about where your student's going to apply, and making sure that you have a college list that is balanced academically, but also financially. So if you do the right research and you build the right list, then you won't hopefully run into financial issues at the end when your student has to make decisions about where they're going to enroll. So let me stop sharing here and jump to showing you how this tool works. Okay, so can people see this screen where it says, welcome to Insights? Okay, let me just put the chat back on. Okay, so if you go to insights.roadtocollege.com, this is what you'll get. And you can create a free account, and I'll show you what you can see with a free account. And then we honestly have paid accounts. So we have 3 different levels of paid accounts. The basic level is, you get access to everything that's in the tool. The other 2 levels is you get access to monthly live, you get access to more content and experts to answer your particular questions. So we have a level that's called the plus level, where you get access to all of our content that is produced monthly. And the highest level is you get invited to the live events, and you can have any of your questions answered. Plus you get discounts if you want to do, and you need to do any one-on-one work. So let me sign in. I already have an account. So if you were coming in and you don't have an account, you would sign up for free. They will ask you some questions to fill out a profile, and then you're going to come to the section that I'm going to go into since I already have an account. Okay, that didn't, hold on. Okay, so I like to go to what I call the power search, because this is where you can do some of the searching that I've been talking about. So we have a database of 3,590 colleges. The reality is that most people are searching for about, 500 of these colleges. They're not looking at all 3,500, but this is data that we get from the government on all the possible colleges that are out there. So we include it. And you can search if you know that you have a particular school that you're interested. I'll just say, Tulane. You can search, it pulls up Tulane. You can click on this and you get, all the specific data about Tulane. You can search by majors. So I'm interested in schools that have accounting major. It's gonna, pull that up. And you can search for any combination of this. So I might want to look at, accounting majors that are in the New England region. And I'm also interested in schools in Colorado and California. So, that's how you can start to create your lists. I'm just going to clear this for the time being. And then these are filters that we find particularly helpful and important for people to use. That's why we've called them out on the side here. So if you have a budget, as I was saying, you might want to say, show me all the private schools that have a cost of attendance between 40,000, or let's actually even say 30,000 and 60,000. Okay, so this is a quick way of saying, of kind of looking at, what if I didn't get any aid? What if my student get any need-based aid and we didn't get any merit scholarships and we had to pay the sticker price, and our budget is 35,000, so or whatever, somewhere between this range. So show me the schools that are that have a cost of attendance in that range. That's my budget. In case I don't get any aid, I want to see what those schools are. And then you can sort these schools by all the different criteria that we have, and then you can add them to a list. And I'll show you what that list will look like. But this is how you start the search process. Let me just clear this for the time being. Another way that you can search is, hey, show me the schools that that are very generous, that offer, $30,000 in merit award, like up to 100,000. Nobody offers 100,000. But show me what are those schools, and then sort this list by what the average merit award is. So now let me see. Okay, so Duke comes up as number one, that they give a merit award of 77,000. The other data to look at is how many students receive that merit. So yes, Duke is actually very generous for need-based aid, but they do give a few merit scholarships, but they're only giving them to 3% of the students. So this is, off the bat, you can see it's a very competitive merit scholarship. Only 3% of the students are going to get it. So this is not a merit scholarship I would really bank on. But if your student's interested in Duke, you might want to, research a little further, because there's a slight possibility that they might, be eligible for a merit scholarship. But so it's important to kind of look at that combination of what the dollar value is of the merit scholarship and what percentage of students actually receive it. So that's one way of doing a search. And then, but that search I just did has nothing to do with your student. That search is just based on how generous colleges are. So let me kind of scroll down here to test scores. As much as we hate it, the best data to see where your student sits academically for colleges is still based on test scores. And it's really purely because this is the data that colleges collect the most and report the most. So they just have more information about test scores. They do have GPAs, but as you look through, and this is just a data issue, colleges, and I've never gotten to the bottom of this, and I really want to know why, they don't share enough good detailed information about their GPA. So they might share average GPA, but they don't share what does the students who are in the top quartile or top 25th percentile, what's their GPA? They don't share that. A lot of colleges, for whatever reason, don't even share the average GPA. So there's just less data to search on for GPA and more data related to test scores. So even if your student's going to apply test optional, because it's just searching, I would still use their test score as an indicator. Or another way, if your student truly doesn't have a test score, they didn't even take it, I would Google, there's a really good table by Prep Scholar, and I would just Google Prep Scholar SAT to GPA converter, or Test Scholar ACT to GPA converter. And they show you that if my student had like a 3.8 GPA, that this is the range that likely that they would perform on a SAT. So, and then use those numbers to just do your searching. But let's just go here and say, let's say my student got, somewhere between a 1300 to 1400 on the SAT. I want to filter all these schools by where that 1300 to 1400 range is where that puts me at the top of a college's academic profile. So that's why I want to pick this option that says top range. So this is now going to show me all the colleges that a range of 1300 to 1400 on an SAT is at what we call the 75th percentile, or at the top of what their academic profile is. So now there's 197 colleges that fall within that range, but I don't know anything else about them. I don't know, do these colleges give merit? How much merit do they give? What their admission rate is? Do they do they have early decision? Do they have early action? I don't know about that yet. All I know is that 197 colleges have a SAT range of 1300 to 1400 in their 75th percentile. So now I can start to sort this. If I'm most interested in looking at merit, I'm going to say, okay, now sort this by merit. And these are the colleges that of the 197 that offer merit, and this is now in descending order. And I could start looking and say, okay, Bennington College, if my student applied and they had between that 1300 and 1400, it's likely that Bennington would offer them $40,000 in aid, and they are offering 90% of the students who do not have need-based aid, they're offering this merit scholarship to. So, there's much more to research about Bennington College, and is it the right college your student should apply to? But from a quick financial view, I can say, hey, if my student applied to Bennington and our SAI, is above 85,000, that the likelihood, and my student has between 1300 and 1400, my student, we would probably have a net cost of close to $245,000, even though the sticker price says $85,000 for Bennington. And this is how you start to estimate ahead of your student even applying to college what these colleges might cost you. So I would recommend doing this type of searching, going through, and you can add a full search result to a list, or you can pick individual colleges and add them to lists. You can name your list whatever you want. Let me go and show you some lists. Okay, so these are lists that I've, this is my sample account. This is lists I've made. I'm going to pull up just, these are colleges that have early decision. That's the way I made the list. Okay, so now you get to see these colleges in what I call a table view, which some people like. Some people are like the thumbnail view. Some people like this table view because we're, so used to like Excel and spreadsheets. And then to not overwhelm people, you can add on the different categories of data. So I'm going to add admissions data. I'm going to add the data about merit scholarships. I'm going to add the financial data, which has costs and debt information in there. And now, as I scroll through, I can also sort these columns by ascending or descending. So let's look at merit scholarship, because that's a column here. It is right here. Average merit award that is given to a student that doesn't have need-based aid. I'm going to sort that column. And again, happens that, Duke has early decisions, so they're coming up high. So now I can quickly look at, these are the colleges that have early decision and that are also giving merit scholarships. So again, some of these schools give merit scholarships, but to very few students, and some of them give them to a lot of students. So, Bennington College is there again with giving it to 90% of students. Susquehanna is another college that gives very generous merit scholarships. They give it to a lot of students that fit their criteria, 70% of students that don't have need-based aid. So again, now these are just different ways you can sort the columns, and we're trying to drill in further and further and further about which colleges your student might be most interested in. There's a lot more research that you need to do, but we're just trying to narrow down from 3,500 colleges to maybe 50 colleges or 40 colleges or 30 colleges, which you then have to dig in more. You're going to want to go to the website, look at the social environment. Obviously, location's an issue. Look at their virtual tours, go to an information session. There's a lot more you're going to look at before your student decides to apply, but at least we're starting to get a handle on which ones are feasible financially and where your student can get merit scholarships. The other column, or section that I find interesting, is about particularly this list is about early decision, is looking at admit rates. So a lot of colleges share their overall admit rate. So in this case, I just sorted this column by, let's sort it the other way. So this is overall admit rate. And let's look. So Northeastern, gosh, had a 6% overall admit rate. But if you really break it out, they actually admitted 39% of their early decision students. So you can see if your student is really interested in Northeastern and they have the right stats, they might want to consider applying early decision, because early decision, the college admitted a much higher percentage of students. The other two fields to look at is the reason why Northeastern admitted so many students is they filled their class. They filled over 50% of their class by early decision. So that's this column here that says the percent of class filled early decision is 56%. And what that means is that their regular decision, which is here, was a lot more competitive because there's only 44% of the seats left. And you have fewer seats and a lot more students applying regular decision. So that's why the regular decision admit rate was 4%. So again, these are numbers that are important to look at to understand your students' competitiveness of applying, and then how competitive the school is at different different application deadlines. Is it better to apply early decision? Of course, there are a lot of other decisions that are part of that, and particularly financial. Should my student apply early action? How much of the class is being accepted early decision? Now, this is information that's important to know, and you can know it. So that's why I pointed out. So I know it's 10 after 1. I've gone over. I myself only have a few minutes. I got to drive my daughter to meet a train. So let me just scroll through the questions to see if there's anything I can ask quickly. And then if anybody has more questions, you can always email me at support@roadtocollege.com, and we can try and answer the questions that way. Based on this chart, is it fair to generalize that the better the college, the less merit aid they give to students without need? So strong students without need are expected to pay. Yes. So I don't know, Kit. Yeah, you basically summed it up very nicely and quickly. The more competitive colleges, meaning where students are just, want to apply, don't have to use their money to attract a better student because those students are already kind of naturally sending in their applications. So the quote, the better the college, meaning if you want to use the term better, meaning more popular, maybe higher ranked on whatever ranking system you're looking at, they tend to offer less merit. In fact, they tend to offer no merit. And we have actually a whole nother discussion that we do on like, how do you value how good a college is? We shouldn't be going by the rankings. That's really like a marketing game that's going on. Your student can get a very good education at lots of schools that quote sit lower down on the rankings. I don't believe that a ranking really determines the value of the education at a college. That's more research that you can dig into, and that you should. And so just because a college sits at a certain ranking, even priced at a certain price point, doesn't mean that your student's going to get the best education there. And then of course you have to evaluate what the cost of the education is, and the ROI, and whether you feel that it is worth it at any of these colleges. Okay. So do I mean for Bennington College, if your SAI is less than, not more than 85, the student would be eligible for merit aid? No, let me clarify that example. So if your SAI is above the college's cost of attendance, then your student, the only money that your student's going to receive is in the form of merit aid. I guess I should clarify a little bit, Allison. If you have an SAI that's less than the cost of attending, your student can still get merit. And maybe that wasn't clear. Your student can still get merit, but if you truly need money to reduce the cost, your student isn't going to get any need-based aid from Bennington. We didn't even look if they really give out need-based aid. But if your family's SAI is above 85,000, the only money you're going to be eligible for is merit. So that's what I was trying to explain. Okay, so Harry's asking, is this the per year cost? And I'm not sure if you're referring to, so the numbers that are in Insights are per year. So the cost of attendance is per year, the merit is per year, the aid is per year. The admit rates is all that a per year number. So that is per year. I also don't know if you're referring to the cost of using Insights. We have a monthly rate, and we do have an annual rate, which we give you a discount if you take the annual rate. Okay, so let me look through if there's any other questions that are really like scream out to me, and I can send an email about them. But hopefully this gave you a really quick kind of understanding of how to start to look for colleges that offer merit aid. You can do this without our Insights tool. It's just going to take you longer. It's going to be a little harder because you're going to have to Google each individual college's common data set, because that's where the information is about merit scholarships and what percentage of the students receive merit scholarship. It's actually some of this, these columns are data that we calculated, not that it's hard, but you can get this information from a school's common data set. It's just a lot more onerous on you to gather the information. And it's a lot harder to know what colleges are out there that might fit your criteria, because you're going to have to Google individual colleges. So you don't kind of get the benefit of a full database. So I guess if anybody has particular questions about how to use Insights, please email me. I will show you quickly. I think that we actually have on our YouTube some videos if you want to see examples, more examples about how to use Merit, how to use Insights. And here it is. Insights instructional videos. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different videos that kind of show you in more detail what I might have kind of quickly gone through about how you use the power search, how you create a list. So if you want more information, please feel free to go to these videos and check them out, and also to send me any questions at support@roadtocollege.com. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I will hope you have great holidays. This is our last webinar of 2024, but we've got a lot planned for 2025. So see you soon. Take care. Bye.